I reckon let's get started. Okay, so hello, Sarah Denham here, and you've come along today, you've come along to learn some tips on how to effectively engage your audience so that they stay with you. And indeed, a lot of the key factor about engaging the audience is not keeping their attention, but actually regaining it after you've lost their attention. Because as we all know, everyone's attention span nowadays is so short that it's really, really easy for people to drift off. So we'll be giving you tips today on that, and of course the pressure's really on me to be engaging, so that I can maintain that for you. I understand fully that you could be doing anything with this 30 minutes, and I really don't take that for granted, so I will get on with it. I promise that you're going to learn some great proven techniques that will give you more confidence and enable you to get your message across more easily, effectively than you have before. So you're going to learn about 4 different areas which you need to focus on. And in each area, I'm going to give you specific tips or techniques. You might even want to take notes. And I promise that you'll walk away at the end of the session with clear and simple practical concepts that you can work on. And it's also worth adding that you may already be using some of these, but one of the greatest roadblocks to success, and I know I've found this in my own life, is saying to yourself, yes, I know that already. You may know this information, you may have heard it many times, but it's still worth asking yourself, have I actually taken action on it? Because if we don't act on something, it's almost as if we never knew the information in the first place. So with that in mind, thanks for being here, and I'm just going to give you a little bit about my background and then we'll get right into the material. So my story is that I struggled for years with performance and public speaking anxiety, and I was a student at music college in the UK and I coped, but then unfortunately chronic and severe eczema took over my entire body and I deteriorated until I had to be hospitalised a couple of times. And at one point I didn't leave the house for 3 months and my world was basically minuscule, a couple of rooms really. And when I resurfaced, I wasn't cured but I was improved, but I had a big problem because my previous decline while I was still performing had made my anxiety overwhelming and I could barely get onto stage. So I had to do something or lose my career. And I found my solution after some trial and error, and the way back was learning how to speak in public, which I was also appalling at. I started as an incredibly nervous speaker. I used to swallow compulsively mid-sentence. I had no eye contact. My voice shook. It was really bad. So I joined groups and I worked on it. And I started to really enjoy it. And eventually, what's happened is that I've set up my own presentation skills training business. And then, of course, I had to take my ability to engage audiences and sell myself to a whole new level. And I'm introverted, I'm British. I used to hate selling myself. I don't know if you can relate to that discomfort, but it was a real struggle for me. So I had to learn how to do it. And look, I'm absolutely nothing special. If you choose to put some time into this, you too can become an excellent speaker. Because one of the myths around is that great speakers aren't born that way. People think that they are born and, you know, you're either born that way or you're not. And that's simply not true. If you can become a great speaker if you work at it. So let's get into the material. Okay, so what we're going to cover today, 4 easy triggers for high audience engagement. And the first 2 are around your mindset and it's not about you and be a leader in the room. And the second 2 are about the specific techniques of making sure that you have clarity and variety in terms of how you present. Okay, so the first thing to be aware of, it's not about you. And you may well again have heard this one before, but fundamentally the audience doesn't care about you. They might be concerned if you were to, you know, keel over in front of them and they would do something about it, but basically they really are only in it for themselves. And too often I still see business presenters going on and talking about the history of their company or how they came to this conclusion around what they're going to present today, and they're very long-winded about it, and the audience simply doesn't care. So never assume that you are interesting or that the audience is interested. And you might also have the opposite issue, where I often have people come to me and they say, actually, I think I'm quite boring as a presenter, or I know that my topic is really boring. That's particularly common, I have to say, sometimes with accountants or financial advisors or bankers. They just go, look, I work in this area and it's really just not interesting. But there are always ways to make your presentation more interesting. And obviously we're going to cover some of those today. And one tip to ensure that you are relevant and useful to your audience is to do this as you are creating your presentation, or if someone's created it for you in another department, then go through it and ask yourself this. Say to yourself at the end of every main point, say to yourself, so what this means to you is, because that, if you do that, it will connect you with your audience members. You have to tie it in, because if you can't answer that question, it means that you haven't thought carefully enough about what their concerns are, what their needs are. And you can actually verbalize this occasionally during your presentation. You don't have to, but the vital part is to actually do it as you are creating, as you are writing the content, the material. So what this means to you is, so if you're thinking about benefits and not features, which is obviously, that's a key selling point, and it's something that's very, very commonly and often talked about. Again, people still tend to focus on features. You have to go for the benefits, the what is in it for the audience. Pardon me. And 4 of the main benefits you can tie into the fact that it can save your audience time, can save them money, shared humanity, which is also one of my favorites, because I believe that one of the main reasons for public speaking is to connect with others and to be useful to other people. And then there's also quality of life as well. How can you improve their quality of life? So whatever it is that is relevant to what your presentation covers, make sure that you're tying in some benefits. Okay. It's also important that you address resistance and hot buttons, because there's nearly always going to be resistance in your audience. And one of the things I did today, I don't know if you were on at the very beginning, but one of the things I covered was that I said, look, the pressure's on me to make sure that I am engaging, because one of the questions in your mind was, look, if she's going to talk about high audience engagement, is she going to actually be engaging? So, you know, you might just be staying on to see whether or not I end up boring you. And I don't think that will be the case, but it's important to just address any elephant in the room, any resistance that you have. And so again, you turn it around. You think about your audience. You think, what are the questions that they're asking in their heads? And another good way to do this is to say to yourself, if there's one question I would not want this audience to ask me, what would that be? And then you make sure that you cover that so that you're on top of it. It's really, really important. Okay. Another way to make sure that you make your presentation about your audience and not about you is to use you and we focused language. Don't be the peacock. Don't be the narcissist in the room. And one way, again, to do this is, instead of using I a lot, and in fact, they did a recent study about narcissism in CEOs in Australia, the COOs, the CEOs, anyone in the C-suite. They did a study and they found that the most narcissistic personalities used I a huge amount more than the people with more humility and more empathy and ability to engage with their audience. Politicians are also very keen on using I when they try to assert their authority. But even if you're not narcissistic and you're not a politician, it's still really easy to go on and say, now, today I'm going to talk to you about this, and this is relevant because I think this, or this has happened in my experience. Look, people might want some of your background, but you don't want to spend much time on I if you can. So you could turn your language around, and one thing that I always advise my clients to do when they first start to speak is, instead of saying, today I'm going to teach you about, or today I'm going to talk about, say, today you're going to learn, or today we're going to cover. So you use you or we. And you use you, obviously, if you want to completely make it about them, get yourself out of the way. Now, the only tricky one about using you, and you need to be careful of this, is that you can come across as though you're preaching, particularly if you're trying to teach people something. If you say, well, you should do this, well, by should is never good, by the way, but if you say you need to do this, that's going to get people offside, and you might not even mean it in that preachy kind of evangelical way, but it's something to be really conscious of. So that's where you might want to say, look, would it be a good idea? I've found this, and this might be helpful for you. And if you use we-focused language, then you're making yourself on their level part of a team, and that can be really engaging as well. So just avoid the use of I any more than you need to. Okay, so the second mindset technique is to be a leader. And my belief is that one of the most frightening parts about public speaking, and the thing that, well, there are many reasons why people become afraid of speaking, but one of the main reasons is the fact that fundamentally they know that they are in the position of authority at the front of the room, and they have to lead that room. They have to lead the energy, they have to lead the call to action, or what it is that they want the audience to do as a result of the presentation, and that can be very challenging. And I'm going to talk about myself now. I'm going to use I, but only for the reason that I believe it will help you to know where I've come from on this one. And that is, I was not ready for many, many years. I was a follower. I was not a leader. And when I made the decision to actually go out and build my business and really go for it, my lovely partner said to me, look, if you don't turn around how you feel about being a leader, if you don't step up, you will simply not succeed, because there's a weakness there that will be, I don't think he said this part, but I perceived it, there was a weakness, and that you'll be exploited, that you won't have the strength to carry it through. So you need to be the leader in front of the room. You also need to be the most organized person in the room too. That's always good if you're presenting, and we'll come on to that when we talk about clarity. So your goal is to influence. You are at the front of the room, you are standing up, so you may as well just go for it. It's the fact is that the audience takes their cue from us. Always they take their cue from us. They might be coming in a certain mood. Your goal is to change that mood, depending on what it is that you're trying to convey. But I have found that 4 things are really, really important. And I've worked with these ideas both for myself and with many clients, and they really do work. You need to have conviction and certainty around what you're saying, and you need to have energy and enthusiasm around what you're saying. Okay, so let's look at these in turn. So conviction and certainty. Now, when you present, it's very important that you are authentic. And authenticity means quite a few things. One of them is the ability to be spontaneous and to be yourself on stage. But being yourself is fine. You just have to be slightly bigger than usual. And the bigger the room, the bigger the audience, the bigger you have to be. So the larger your gestures need to be, the stronger your voice needs to be. You need to be bold. So it's about being yourself, but just slightly larger than life. Because people say, oh, you just be yourself. But if you are just yourself on stage, particularly if you don't have a high amount of energy or you're introverted, being yourself is actually not going to be engaging enough. It just isn't. So you need to actually say, okay, I need to ramp up here. And I'm going to give you 3 suggestions. Here's the first one. Expand mentally. So you have to trust your ideas and be bold. You have to say, look, I am at the front of the room. So I'm just going to go for it. Because people are sick of having too many options. People are overwhelmed nowadays, and they're looking for certainty. They're looking for clarity as well, which we'll come to, but they're looking for certainty. They want to know that you've thought about what you're talking about and you believe in it. So there's a boldness in that. Second point in terms of being convincing and having certainty is to expand yourself physically. And an awful lot of clients don't do this, especially if they do have nervousness. You need to fully inhabit the space available to you. And that means really strong body language. It means being grounded, feet hip width apart, using your peripheral vision, which sounds quite odd, but that also helps you to have that sense that you are taking up more of the room, that you perceive more of the room. And taking your energy out there. So imagining that your energy is actually bouncing to the back of the room. You're filling the whole space in that room. Otherwise, we often see presenters, I don't know if you can relate to this, but we see presenters who look as though they're simply presenting to themselves. And that's partly because they're not getting that conviction and that certainty out beyond themselves and connecting with the people in the room. A third way is to expand the time, take up time space. People often don't use the time that is rightfully theirs when they are in front of other people and they're the leader. Breathing is so important, and it makes a huge difference in terms of how you feel and how much control you appear to have. If you don't breathe properly, I can promise you, you will not be engaging, because you won't have that solidity and that sense that you are in control. And if you want to be engaging, people are looking for that. So breathing low down into your diaphragm, using your diaphragm into your belly, taking a breath. Breathe before you start to speak, breathe between your points. Give the audience time to reflect. Don't just run away with it all. So give them space. You also want to use strong words, not what I call flabby words. So if you're trying to be certain and convincing, you need to give really, have strong sentences. You know, I guarantee this, or I promise this. And I said at the beginning of the webinar today, I said, I promise that you're going to learn good material here that you can go away and use. And that's important. People are looking for that. They want to be guided. You could also say, you know, at the start, you'll think differently about this topic by the end of the presentation. Okay, now let's move on from certainty and conviction to the 2 E's of energy and enthusiasm. And this ties in a little bit to what I was talking about before. You need a lot of energy when you present, and especially if you're presenting virtually, because the effort it needed to actually get through the screen, you need more than you think. A good way to think about it is to think of expanding, not shrinking. And we often shrink when we're nervous. We always shrink when we're nervous. Actually, we contract. So you need to be aware, consciously aware, of doing the opposite, making sure that you expand. And that means taking up what I talked about on the previous slide, taking up space in the room, taking up time, being larger than yourself. You also need to vary your energy. And people say to me, oh, do I come out at 100%? You know, do I come out with a real bang? And the answer to that is no, you don't. Because if you do that, you've got nowhere to go but down. So you never want to start at 100%. You always want to finish high, always. Unless you're giving bad news. That would be the only reason where you would not want to finish high. But then the whole presentation has a different flavor. So the engagement is, you're using engagement in quite a different way, which is not what we're discussing today. When you vary your energy as well, you want to make sure that you match your audience's energy initially. I don't know about you, but I find it intensely irritating if I'm in a bad mood or I'm in a low-key space and the audience is low-key, and then the presenter comes in and goes, hi, how are you doing today? And I'm so excited to be here. And I just look at them. Maybe it's an Australian thing, but I look at them and I go, oh. I'm just totally not into that. At the same time, if I'm looking forward to a presentation and the presenter comes in and is like really laid back or low key or slow, I will get aggravated with that and I will want them to move on, get on with it and lift up a little bit. So you want to make sure that you do vary your energy. You match your audience's energy and then you lead them where you want them to go. Enthusiasm also matters. Really, really important. And here are the reasons, some of the reasons why enthusiasm is so important. I hope you like the cat. I always find that cat picture very, very endearing. Okay, enthusiasm is an antidote to self-consciousness because it's not about you. If you are enthusiastic about your topic, then it enables you to get out of yourself. It's also a great bridge to confidence if you're not there yet. If you're not a confident speaker, but you can be enthusiastic about your topic, that can actually give you some energy to carry you through what's required to get you through the presentation. And if you're enthusiastic, it's about your audience, and it's a lot more fun for everybody. So I highly, highly recommend enthusiasm if you can possibly do it. Obviously not over the top, but it's got to be appropriate, but it needs to be there, and it's something that people often don't think enough about. All right, now we're just going to briefly cover the technique of clarity. One of the main elements that I coach on, both privately and in my courses, is on clarity. And I don't know if that surprises you or not, but clarity is one of the things that is frequently missing. And again, I promise you that if your audience isn't clear about the direction in which you are going, or about what you're going to talk about, or you confuse them because you're confused, if you are remotely confused about what you're doing in your presentation, your audience doesn't have a hope. Not a hope. So it's vital that you know in your own mind you need to create a roadmap for yourself and for your audience. The brain is a pattern maker. Our brains are constantly matching what we already know with what is coming into our environment in the present moment. So we're looking for patterns. We're looking for connection. If you give a roadmap to your audience, like I did at the start today, it means less work for their brains, which is always a good thing because everyone's overwhelmed, and they're going to have greater retention. And what you're after, I would say one of the main things that you're after is to be remembered and repeated for the right reasons, of course, days and weeks after your presentation is finished. So if you create a roadmap, it's going to help. Another way to create clarity is to ensure that you give meaning first before you go into detail. And again, that's something that you would probably do automatically anyway, but just really good to know that that's what's occurring. That you have the meaning, so you give the overview, the overall concept, the big why. I don't know if you know of Simon Sinek, famous United States guy, talks on leadership, and you've got to start with the why. And that's used an awful lot nowadays in the corporate world, and it's vital for good reason, because it's really essential that you start with the why. Why should the audience listen to you? Why should they take your recommendation? Start with the meaning, then move into the lower level detail. Also really important to give examples. And the more examples you can give, again, the easier it is for your audience to match the patterning in their brain and to know how to remember and how to match up what it is that you're saying. So examples are really important. And again, I've given examples throughout this presentation. Editing your own words. And people often talk too much. It's far better to finish early. Now the pressure's really on me. Far better to finish early than waffle on with too many words. And there are lots of reasons why people talk too much when they present. It can be nervousness. It can be a lack of trust in your own ideas, that you feel, this is quite common, I have to say, for quite a lot of female presenters, feeling the need to justify and over-explain themselves. And also for some people, they just enjoy the sound of their own voice. I'm sure we've had speakers like that where you just feel like saying, yes, we've had enough now. But anyway, so just make sure that, again, you edit your words. Edit, edit, edit will give clarity. And the enemy of engagement, the final technique for today, variety. The enemy of engagement is monotony. And if you have a monotonous voice tonality, one way to fix that, to work on it, is to make sure that you might want to record yourself, you be videoed or listen to yourself on your phone or whatever, and also practice at home. Like, imagine that you're telling a story to a child, or that you are talking to your animal, for example. And what voice tonality do you use then? Does it change? And then you just make sure that you go up and down. You can also go faster and slower. If you breathe, you will have more space, and as we talked about earlier, and that will also help to be different. And if you're making a main point, you would pause before and after that point. So, another way to create variety is to ensure that you use both emotional and logical content. And this applies whether you're in a corporate environment or not. You might not go into storytelling if you're in a corporate environment, but you could still tell a little anecdote about your topic or around how you engage with your topic, perhaps, or a client anecdote. And you also want the logical, the data, so that you appeal to both sides of our brains. So you need stats, you need to back things up, and you also need little anecdotes or stories or a little quote, something like that, to just have a different type of engagement. And the final tip in terms of your technique for variety is to chunk your presentation. Now, there's a great book called Brain Rules by John Medina, and he talks specifically around presentations and what he has found works. And the 10-minute rule seems to be the key. So every 10 minutes, as a maximum, you need to make sure that you change up how you deliver or your material. You do something different. So you might get your audience engaging amongst themselves. You might ask a question that they have to get into pairs and answer, for example, if you were running a workshop. Or you might show a video, or at the very least you want to move around on stage and just break it up so that you're not using the same material throughout in the same ways. So getting the audience involved is a really good way to do that, if that's at all possible. And you can even just ask for a show of hands, anything to just keep them alert, keep them alive and awake, to engage them. Okay, well, that was a short overview of 4 triggers that can help you to become engaging with your audience. Now, if anyone has any questions, I'm very happy to answer those just as we finish up, because I know it's now 11:30. So feel free to ask a question. And because we have the 45-second gap, I have a question that actually someone asked me earlier this morning. They wanted to know whether this would be covered. So I said I will make sure I cover it in the Q&A. So the question was, and it came from Brent, this was the idea that if you're a nervous presenter, he said to me, look, I'm quite nervous. What should I work on out of the things that you're going to tell me today? What's the most important thing for me to work on? And I suggested that he should work on clarity, because if you're clear about what you're presenting, it's going to give you a foundation. It's going to give you a degree of confidence that you actually are going to stand up and know what you're talking about. And when people are nervous, they frequently procrastinate and they leave it till the last minute, and then they go, oh, I have to go on now, and I know I'm not ready. And that is the most awful feeling. And what I do when I run my courses, one of the things that people say to me most frequently is, I now realize the importance of presenting, practicing my presentation beforehand, because if you don't, you're really in trouble. Okay, now I've got two questions here from Andrew. Yeah, Andrew says, I get nervous before presenting. Any tips? And Crystal says, how do we combat nervousness? Yeah, well, it's almost a webinar for another day. And I will be running one of those very soon. But how do we combat nervousness? And gosh, okay, the clarity that I've just discussed, that's a really big one. Making sure that making sure that you know what you're talking about. The breathing that I've already mentioned, that is a physical tool that can actually help to calm your system down, because an awful lot of the physical symptoms that we get, if you do get physical symptoms, they are because of adrenaline and cortisol that bank up in the system, and we can't get rid of it because we really want to run or fight, the fight, flight, freeze syndrome. So often we get mind blanks, or we shake, or our heart races. And look, that is just part of the deal. It's also part of it is just accepting that that will happen. But one of the other ways to combat it is by doing low down breathing and making sure, here's a key, making sure that your out breath is longer than your in breath, because that's what sends the signal to your nervous system to calm down, that it's okay to calm yourself down. Then, of course, there are tips around visualization, how you imagine the presentation as it's coming up, all kinds of things that you can do. Okay, so I hope that's covered enough for you. As I say, I will be running another webinar on the how to combat nervousness. Now, Tracy's just asked me, what would you say to someone who's improved their presentation skills and is regarded as a great speaker but still doesn't enjoy doing it? Okay. So what I would suggest there, Tracy, is that you tap in to what it is that you're giving your audience. So I'm not sure in terms of who you're talking about, what they're presenting about, but if you can't enjoy presenting, or you can't enjoy the topic, I would say see if you can enjoy the fact that you are a great speaker. I mean, looking at your question, this person is regarded as a great speaker. I'd say, look, see if you can enjoy that and enjoy getting the message across to the audience. It's almost like seeing it as it's an opportunity to hone your skills further. And for me, I would always be saying, how can I improve myself? Because we're here to grow. I truly believe that we're here on this planet in order to grow. So you could just set yourself a goal if you were good at speaking and say, okay, so what is one thing that I can improve about this one presentation that I'm giving this week? What can I improve? How can I connect more fully? Could I do any research on an element that would help my audience to get what I'm saying even more successfully? How can I be clearer? How can I use more variety? All of these things. You just ask yourself that, and that would be, I would be constantly upping my own levels in terms of my own personal and professional growth. I don't know whether that's a helpful answer, Tracy, but that would be what I would suggest as certainly one way to do it. And then Crystal's saying it's quite intimidating. Yes, it is. I totally understand that. Look, there's a real vulnerability in standing up speaking in front of an audience. And again, we all know that. That's one reason why people are afraid of it, because we are vulnerable and we are being judged. And if people say to you, oh, don't worry, no one's judging you, we know that's not true, don't we? Because you know that when you watch another speaker, you are judging them. And unfortunately, it's just how we're wired, and it's to do with the survival and the threat instinct. In terms of our ancestry, that we're wired that way to say, okay, I have to judge everyone as I meet them to see, are they a threat to me? Are they safe? Are they friendly? Are they worth listening to in today's world? Are they worth listening to? So yes, it is intimidating, and I would entirely agree with that, but there are certainly ways to vastly improve how you feel about your speaking if you are a nervous speaker. Okay, well, there are no more questions coming through, so I will sign off here. I will be running more webinars. If you're interested in any of any of what I offer in terms of private coaching, which I can also do via Skype, so it can be done anywhere in the world. I have the 5-week courses, and I'm also, as I say, going to be running more webinars. So if you're interested, then feel free to sign up. If you haven't already signed up, go to my website, and on the top right-hand side, there's a box that says sign up for my newsletter, and you'll get updates every 2 or 3 weeks. Normally it's every fortnight, depending on what's happening in my world and whether I'm traveling or not. So sign up if you haven't already, and you'll be able to get updates from me. And I look forward to connecting with you in the future. So I hope you found this material useful. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Let me know how you're going with it. Always happy to hear from you and happy to answer any questions. So I hope that you can go out and use perhaps one thing from this material this week, and then perhaps try another thing next week. See how you go. Don't overwhelm yourself all at once. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks very much. Bye for now.